FIIO's hype machine is working overtime with the release of their newest Bluetooth DAC amp. This is the BTR7, a $200 device that is arguably the next step from the BTR5. In this video, we are going to delve into the BTR7, its performance, and its features. Let's get a few things straight. I purchased the BTR7 with my own money. I have no intention of pulling punches or catering to fanboys. As a paying consumer, I have as much a right to discuss my observations, good and bad, as anyone else. If you are here hoping to get another glowing review of a product or want reaffirmation why you bought or should buy the BTR7, then you need to stop this video. When I reviewed the BTR5 a few years ago, I received a lot of pushback from people who did not do real A/B tests or made excuses for that device's shortcomings. If that is your intention with the BTR7, do us all a favor and watch something else. Now, on to the review. FIIO's website refers to the BTR7 as a portable hi-fi Bluetooth ear rator. There is no such thing as an ear rator, and I have never seen this word until now. So even before we delve into the marketing claims, we are bombarded with nonsensical word salad. Perusing the product page, you're inundated with specifications: THX amp circuits, balanced architecture, NQA, high-res certification, and diagrams galore. FIIO installed two ES9219C DACs into the BTR7. This is a two-channel DAC. Having two means theoretically that FIIO has separated each channel into one of the DACs. In other words, one DAC handles the left channel and the other handles the right. The ES9219C was developed for portable devices including mobile phones, tablets, and multimedia systems. Shanling uses this DAC in a few of their devices including the UP5, the R5 Generation 2, and the UA1 Pro. Oh, and Qdelux uses it in the 5K. The BTR7 supports, as a USB DAC, all forms of high-resolution PCM and MQA rendering up to 8x. As a Bluetooth DAC, the BTR7 supports all major codecs from SBC to LDAC. The BTR7 is capable of wireless charging with a Qi-compatible charger. This is something quite different from competitors. Of course, the BTR7 has a color display, and it's about 1 inch square. FIIO claims that they are using 3 levels of independent hi-fi audio architecture to capture every last audio detail. This comment should be analyzed immediately. There's a graphic associated with FIIO's statement about the quote 3 levels of audio architecture. This graph shows a DAC section which sends analog signal to the amp section, which then outputs to one of the two headphone jacks. This is how every DAC amp works. There's nothing innovative about it here. Perhaps FIIO is referring to keep the channels separate throughout the process, in which case even that is not novel since it's been done to death before. Unfortunately, I have no idea why FIIO thinks this quote 3-level architecture is unique. I also find it curious that they claim that this design will quote capture every last detail. This begs the following question. If the BTR7 captures every last detail, then should we consider the BTR5 to be substandard? Did it not capture all the details? Can we conclude the same for FIIO's other products? I say all this to add some necessary cold water to FIIO's hype marketing. Since FIIO does not provide specifics about what they mean about this innovative architecture, I suggest you ignore it as nothing more than an overambitious marketing blurb. One thing we can expect from FIIO is measurements. They're very good about that. And looking at their measurements, we see some interesting numbers. Balanced output maxes out at 320 milliwatts at 32 ohms. THD is far, far, far below what anyone could hear even in their hottest, wettest audiophile nightmares. The frequency response shows a flat, neutral, transparent sound. Let's discuss build. It is, without doubt, excellent. The BTR7 is a chunky device. This is not your typical Bluetooth DAC. In fact, the BTR7 dwarfs the UP4, Qdelux 5K, and ES100. It is far larger than any of the AudioQuest DACs. You might be inclined to think that this is actually a digital audio player if you did not know what it was precisely. The BTR7 is made of aluminum. It feels premium and has considerable weight for a portable Bluetooth DAC. The right side contains all the buttons and microphone. There is a dedicated power button, mode button, volume rockers that double as navigation buttons, and a toggle switch to select between USB charging and USB data. The top of the device has the 3.5mm and 4.4mm headphone jacks. The screen is fairly bright. It offers minimal useful information at first glance, however. On the splash page, the screen will merely show the battery level, volume, signal strength, and connection type. FIIO uses the word generous often in their marketing to describe what you get with the BTR7. The packaging includes a USB-C charging cable, a data cable, and a case. FIIO's website says that the case is fake leather, but in fact, it's not even that. The case is made of canvas-type material, and this glaring difference between marketing and reality is frustratingly idiomatic of FIIO. Regardless, the case is form-fitting and clearly was designed for the BTR7 alone. The side of the case has clear indications for the various buttons. The case does not hinder the button tactility. The case can be used even with wireless charging. Unfortunately, if you want to use the BTR7 with an iOS device, you will need to give FIIO another $10 for the Apple Deluxe version, which includes a USB to Lightning cable. Frankly, they should have just included all of that with the base price. So, kind of. FIIO was mostly generous with the packaging. The BTR7 does not have a clip case. FIIO has no intention of making one. They believe that the BTR7 is far too large to be worn, unlike the UP4 or the ES100 or, of course, the BTR5. And I would tend to agree. The BTR7 is a pocket device and not suitable for clipping to your shirt. Overall, FIIO's marketing takes a few too many liberties, but is otherwise as flamboyant as any other audiophile company. The build is exceptional. The accessories are, but for the upcharge of the Apple cable and the quite odd discrepancy between the marketing for the case and the reality of the case, overall, quite good. I do not waste time talking about how a DAC makes me feel. I am not remotely interested in regurgitating nonsensical emotional mumbo-jumbo about dynamics and warmth and gravitas or any other audiophile nonsense. This is an electronic device and should be assessed with a sober mind, particularly since you're paying $200 for it. Consequently, I split up my tests into various phases. In phase 1, I used the BTR7 for several weeks. I had it plugged into my Apple, Android, and Windows devices. I used it as a Bluetooth DAC amp. In this way, I wanted to find out if I encountered any usability bugs or issues. In phase 2, I compared the BTR7 to some of its cheaper competitors. This includes the Earstudio ES100, Q-Deluxe 5K, and Shanling UP4, one at a time. I plugged each DAC into the same PC and sent signal to two DACs at once using voice meter. I plugged the 3.5mm outputs of each device into a passive AP switch. I used the Austrian Audio IX55, Sennheiser HD6XX, Campfire Audio Andromeda, and meze Rea Penta as my testing headphones and IEMs. I listened to my test playlist, and of course I tried to volume match through voice meter. The goal of this phase was to determine if there's any audible difference between the BTR7 and the competition. In phase 3, I explored the onboard menus on the BTR7. The goal was to determine how easy it is to navigate this device and what functionality you can expect without the FIIO app. Finally, in phase 4, I delved into the FIIO Bluetooth control app. I compared it against the Earstudio app. The goal here was to determine if the extra time FIIO had between releasing the BTR5 and the BTR7, if in that period they improved the functionality of their application. Let's get right into the results of my tests. In phase 1, I used the BTR7 as my go-to device, both wired and wireless. I paired it with my Mac, PC, iPhone, and Android devices. The bottom line is that the BTR7 didn't really present any usability issues. I cannot give a definitive answer because it's a bit more complicated than that. As far as Bluetooth connection is concerned, it was solid. FIIO says that the metal construction of the BTR7 is integrated with the Bluetooth antenna, which should result in more stable connection. I did not find any difference between the Bluetooth connection stability of the BTR7 versus the other devices. I never got reception through walls, or on different floors, or over materially greater distances. I noticed that with nothing in between me and the source, the BTR7 tended to retain signal a little bit further than, say, the ES100 or the UP4, but this was no more than maybe an additional 10 feet. So don't expect Bluetooth connection to be all that much better on the BTR7. Maybe slightly, and it depends a lot on your environment. Bluetooth pairing was simple. In fact, most of the time the BTR7 connected to the last device I paired with very quickly. But there were some odd instances when it just wouldn't pair at all. For example, with my iPhone right next to it, I would power on the BTR7, launch my streaming service, and then hit play. But the iPhone would instead play the audio on its internal speakers. I checked the settings and it showed that the BTR7 was connected to Bluetooth, but on the pull-down menu it didn't show up as an option, and sometimes it did show up as an option. I had to tap in the settings menu to reselect the BTR7. This did not happen regularly, but it did occur often enough to make it worth mentioning, and this is not an issue that I encountered with any of the alternative Bluetooth DACs. Surprisingly, I did not find the BTR7's chunky design off-putting. In fact, I rather preferred it. I never really struggled to find the volume rockers or even the mode button while the BTR7 was in my pocket. The placement, size, and shape of these buttons is fairly good, and the included case actually has indents so that I can feel the buttons I'm searching for without having to glance down. I think it's a good idea for a physical charge mode selector, just as with the BTR7, and there are two benefits to this. First, it might save your battery in the long term. Constant charging when the battery is not depleted might mean you will have less and less capacity as time goes on. So you can use the BTR7 as a USB DAC without charging it or overcharging it. Second, some mobile devices do not like DACs to drain their power supplies. iOS is notorious for refusing to connect to DACs that draw too much voltage from the Lightning port. With the BTR7, you can force the DAC to remain on battery power and never have to deal with that issue. The USB connection is plug and play. There is a driver you should download for Windows. Macs don't need or have one. Usability with mobile devices was also a breeze, without drivers obviously. One issue I found is that when plugged through USB, the BTR7 always showed PCM 44/168. I played various tracks, some with 24-bit 44.1, others as low-res MP3, and the BTR7 always showed the exact same parameters. I even went to the high-res download test bench website and used their tracks. The result was the same. This is pretty odd and essentially means that the screen information is not reliable when in USB DAC mode. Battery life on the BTR7 is definitely an improvement over the ES100. That should not be a surprise considering how small the ES100 actually is. I can usually get about 6 hours of continual playback on the BTR7 before I will need to recharge. This will depend on your volume and connection type obviously. The BTR7 can be charged either through USB or with a wireless charger. The device will charge even with its case on. Unfortunately, wireless charging seemed a bit inconsistent with my device. Sometimes the BTR7 simply would not charge even though its screen showed that it was charging when placed on the wireless charger. I've never had this issue with my iPhone, which I also use with the same charger. The BTR7 does a common sense thing that the venerable ES100 does not. If you turn the BTR7 off, then charge it either through a charging mat or wired, the device stays off. The ES100 in contrast will turn on and you will have to manually turn it off after charging. Ultimately, the BTR7 did not really cause me significant issues. The problems here were more annoying than aggravating. I have to say, the wrong playback resolution displayed on screen while in USB mode takes much away from the concept of having this display in the first place. The odd connection and charging issues were intermittent, and it's possible they could be explained by an iOS bug and something amiss with the charger. Still, the issues were there often enough to note, and you should consider them if you're thinking of buying the BTR7. By the way, the BTR7 had no issues driving my gear. This device effectively powered all of my IEMs and many of my headphones. The HD6XX and Biodynamic T1 2nd Gen, for example, got plenty of power. Let's move on with Phase 2. This is where I compared the BTR7 against competitors in head-to-head true A/B comparisons. The quick answer is that the BTR7 is a transparent, flat, neutral DAC amp. When EQ is disabled and all the comparative DACs were volume matched, there was no audible difference at all among them. There were occasions when I thought that the BTR7 presented somewhat harder bass impact or clarity when compared to the ES100, but those differences always evaporated when I decreased volume on the BTR7 or increased on the ES100. Other than that, there was no difference in sound quality. It's impossible to test these things in a true comparison over Bluetooth. That's simply not possible since no device I know of will send Bluetooth audio to two DACs at once. So I had to use a workaround. I loaded some FLAC music onto my LG V30 and sent some Galaxy Tab 8, then streamed at the same codecs. I then plugged each DAC into the A/B switch and used my various headphones and IEMs. Yes, this utilizes two different sources, but that's what we have. In this comparison, there was no audible difference. Once again, volume matching was critical. I know plenty of people think these DAC amps have better sound than something else. YouTube and online reviews are replete with comments that the BTR7 or UP4 or ES100 sound amazing or have more dynamics or any number of other silly statements. In fact, these are all transparent DACs. If you think you're buying the BTR7 because you will experience audio quality that audibly is better than some of the competitors, I think you're mistaken. And if you ask me why others claim the alternative, my answer is that they do not conduct actual A/B comparisons. Let me put this another way. If you want a DAC amp that does not exhibit audible distortion and allows you to listen to your music without coloration, then any of these products I mentioned in this review will do the job equally well. Now, on to Phase 3. This is where I navigated the BTR7's onboard menu to determine its usability. You have to hold the power button down to access the menu. Hold it too long and the device will shut down. This, in my opinion, is a silly design. The power button should remain the power button, but I suppose FIIO wanted to keep the playback control separate from the menu access button. The volume rocker will allow you to move among the various options. The mode button will let you make selections. When in a submenu, tapping the power button will take you back to the previous menu screen. The options you get are gain, DAC filter, EQ, car mode, U audio, screen brightness, language, screen timeout, input priority, factory reset, and the firmware version. You get two gain options, low and high. You get two DAC filters, neither of which make a lick of difference, just like any DAC filter. The roll-off on these filters begins at the end of your ability to hear beyond 20 kHz. So, not really a transformative feature. EQ lets you select among the various presets FIIO baked into the device. You also have the ability to select one user set EQ. You have to use the FIIO control app to create your own custom EQ, and you can only get one custom preset to save. Car mode will turn the BTR7 on and off depending on whether your car's engine is on or off. You have to plug the BTR7 into your car's USB port. When you start your car, the USB port becomes active, which then prompts the BTR7 to turn on, which then will allow it to connect to your source via Bluetooth, and then you can play what you want on your source. Of course, you will need to have an aux cable from the BTR7 to the aux input in your car to hear anything on your car's speakers. Frankly, this just seems like a hassle. Isn't it simpler to just connect your phone either by Bluetooth to the car or through an aux cable? But at least it is a feature that someone might take advantage of. U Audio lets you select between the two USB drivers that FIIO has for Windows. Apparently, if set to UAC1, you do not need to download the driver for Windows, while in UAC2, you will. The rest of the menu options are self-explanatory. Ultimately, menu navigation is pretty easy. It is reasonably quick as long as you remember what the power and mode buttons do, which is something that shouldn't really take you very long to understand. Finally, let us discuss Phase 4. This is where we delve into the FIIO control app, and this is where things get ugly. First and foremost, I want to highlight my review of the BTR5 2 years ago. There, I said that the BTR5 was a fine device, but it was overhyped, particularly since the FIIO app was a buggy mess. Shortly after I released my video, FIIO apparently published a separate app now called FIIO Control. I was told by BTR5 owners that this app had no issues, or simply was told that I was lying about the app's failures, even though it was patently obvious in the video. I tell you this because it has been 2 years since that video and over 2 years since FIIO released the BTR5. Surely, they no longer have the issues they had previously. And yet, my first issue with the BTR7 is with the connectivity with the application. My BTR7 is always synced to my iPhone. It is already paired and selected for in the output section. When I launch the control app, however, the app says that the BTR7 is not connected and I have to manually connect it in the application. Compare this to the Ear Studio app. Once you turn the ES100 on, it will pair to the phone. You can launch the Ear Studio app and the app will automatically find the ES100. So clearly, this is not a hurdle in programming or syncing or hardware restrictions. The FIIO app's first page lets you select idle power time off and the operation mode for the buttons, which we will get into later. Compared to the ES100 app, which lets you delve into volume control and other meaningful features immediately. The next page for the FIIO app is EQ. You get to select among 7 presets plus 1 custom. In my opinion, these are serviceable presets, but not remotely sufficient in quantity. The ES100's app gives you 26 options, 4 of which are custom settings. However, both the BTR7 and ES100 apps have a 10-band EQ. The third page on the FIIO app lets you control volume, both on the source and on the BTR7. You can also check channel balance and select distortion compensation. Now, you may want to know what distortion compensation does. I wish I could tell you. You can click the question mark icon next to the option. It will pop up, then immediately disappear, every single time. The channel balance slider is a little sticky. You have to shift to the various notches to activate the balance. Incremental variations seem not to make a difference. In other words, it does not seem to affect anything if you put the slider between 2 notches. And sometimes it can be difficult to return the slider back to 0 as it will be just a bit over to one side or to the other. Finally, the last page is for basic instructions on how to use the BTR7. Whoop-de-doo. The control app has improved in at least one respect over my experience with the BTR5. The original app used to crash incessantly. The new app does not. But the information boxes still disappear. The requirement to force select the BTR7 even though it is already connected via Bluetooth is a persistent issue from the last version of this app. The placement of the pages puts the least important information and options on page 1 and the most important second and third. The EQ options are a joke in comparison to the vast amount of variations you get on the ES100 app. And let's be perfectly honest, the FIIO app is a poor, lazy attempt when you look at the Ear Studio app. Ear Studio provides a wide gamut of options beyond what I covered here. Speaking of options, let's get back to the BTR7 buttons. You recall how FIIO's marketing promises that we can customize the BTR7's buttons to how we like? You have a binary choice for one button. One of my complaints with the BTR5 was that its volume buttons required repeated presses to change volume. Holding them down did nothing. So if you went from a sensitive IEM to a headphone, you could end up pressing over a dozen times on the volume button to finally get suitable volume for your headphones. Here, the BTR7 arrived with the same problem. FIIO evidently released an update which lets you select whether you want short, repeated presses, or to hold the volume rocker down to change volume. If you want the volume rocker to change volume by repeated presses, then long pressing them will control forward and backward controls for your music. If you choose to have the volume rockers change volume by holding them down, then double tapping the rockers will change forward and backward playback. That is the complete list of the quote button customization that FIIO promises. I am going to be blunt. FIIO's marketing regarding the customization of the BTR7 is misleading at the least and an outright lie at worst. Ultimately, the FIIO Control app does not crash, provides minimal EQ options, and has consistent bugs carried over from the previous version of this app, and has nonsensical placement of features. This is a sorry excuse for an app, particularly for a device as expensive as the BTR7. The last time I made a similar complaint about the BTR5, I was told that it's not a big deal because people don't use the apps anyway. Well, if the app sucks, has no meaningful features, and is frustrating to use, then why would you use it? If the app was as robust as Ear Studio's, you would at least give it a try. Oh, and while we're on this subject, the Qdelux 5K has nearly an identical app to the Ear Studio as far as functionality is concerned. So either Qdelux stole Ear Studio's app's idea, or it is not as proprietary as we might think, and it simply is a matter of putting in the effort. Surely, FIIO could have done much better with their application, and for the price they charge, they absolutely should have. The BTR7 shows some promise. It is, I think, a more logically built device compared to the BTR5. In fact, the tiny nature of the Bluetooth DACs in general, like the ES100, UP4, and BTR5, might make them a little difficult to use for some people. I think the BTR7's physical design is quite good. It is a testament to quality construction. While some people are unhappy without a clip accessory, you really have to keep this device in perspective. It was never intended as another DAC that you wear, and FIIO made that pretty clear, I think. The BTR7 comes with some pretty good accessories. The inclusion of a case is in some ways forward-thinking. Without a clip, obviously you need some type of protection. This device has a transparent sound. It sounds no different from its cheaper competitors. When you do volume match real A/B comparisons, that fact is hard to ignore. But don't think of that as a negative. If you want coloration to your music, you do have the option of applying one of the various EQ. But things are not all great. While the BTR7's design is surprisingly good, its software holds it back, just like with the BTR5. The new FIIO app does not crash. Whoop-de-doo. That's a nice change, but the app is also barely noteworthy. Its layout is illogical and rudimentary, its EQ potential is seriously limited, and the app is still buggy. The BTR7's screen, while nice, doesn't do much. I suppose every once in a while you might want to know the Bluetooth codecs you're connected with, but the more important information is relegated to tiny spots. Volume and connection strengths are miniature icons dwarfed by the resolution information, as if that's all you're ever going to look at. That resolution information is not always accurate. When connected as a USB DAC, the BTR7 did not correctly display the resolution I was playing. FIIO has an FAQ on a related issue, and their explanation about this also doesn't make much sense. The customization that FIIO promised is laughable at best and an ugly lie at worst. The inability to change the screen layout is stunningly short-sighted. We're given a large, bright display and have no way of highlighting the things that interest us. The buttons cannot be customized. The only option you get is how you want the volume altered. And that was a fix to an issue that had been previously reported, and I think I was the first one to harp on it with the BTR5 2 years ago. Let's summarize. Is the BTR7 value? That depends. If you're convinced the BTR7 is amazing and cannot believe anyone who would make negative comments about it, then you're already inclined to buy it. Go right ahead. If you're looking for an all-in-one Bluetooth DAC which can power your IEMs and headphones, then the BTR7 does have enough power, I think. If you believe your headphones do not get loud enough with the BTR7, then either you listen very loudly indeed, or your headphones are particularly difficult to drive. If you're expecting to get amazing sound quality, the best in its class from the BTR7, you really should spend some time thinking about why people have told you that. The BTR7 sounds perfectly fine, just like other devices. I think you're wasting time and money chasing the elusive audiophile golden goose called dynamics and DAC sound signatures, but it's your money. Finally, if you're looking for a replacement to the ES100 or Q Deluxe 5K, I think you're going to be disappointed. While superior in build, the BTR7 is severely limited by its software. If you plan to buy the BTR7 anyway, just step into its hype world knowing you're getting a pale shadow of app features. As for me, well, I think I'm keeping the BTR7 for now. While I am frustrated at FIIO's repeated failure to do anything with their software, I do find use of the BTR7. It is better built than the competitors, arguably has more power, and its size makes it a bit more easy to handle for me. Sadly, the BTR7 is far from a perfect device. You can say that about the ES100, Q Deluxe 5K, UP4, and probably anything else. The problem I see is that given a chance to make significant strides to outdo competitors, FIIO dropped the ball. Again. Had the BTR7 a robust application like EarStudio and Q Deluxe, it would be really quite difficult for those devices to compete against the BTR7. I also do not approve of FIIO's penny pinching of the lightning cable. They should have just included it. FIIO already has 2 cables in the standard packaging. They should have nixed one and put the lightning cable in instead. That would have reduced their SKU by 1 and reduced their packaging and stock issues. As it is, given some of the BTR7's quirks and the lazy attempt at an application, I think $200 for the BTR7 is not a fair price. I think $150 is what this thing really should cost. But if you're inclined to spend the full MSRP, just make sure you think about what you expect and whether the BTR7 can deliver for you.